Hello, and welcome to Code Your English, the place where we don't just study English, we actually learn how to use it smartly, one honest idea at a time. If you've ever felt like you know more English than you can actually speak, you're exactly who this channel was built for. So before we get into today's episode, if this kind of content is helping you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because every episode here is designed to move you a little closer to speaking with real confidence, not just passing another grammar quiz. And today's episode might change how you think about your entire learning process, because we're going to talk about something most English learners are getting completely wrong in the age of AI. It's not about which app you use or how many hours you study. It's about a simple mistake that quietly stops progress before it even starts. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it in your own learning habits. So, imagine someone who has been learning English for 6 years. She has a notebook full of grammar rules. She has watched hundreds of hours of English videos. She knows the difference between the present perfect and the past simple better than most native speakers do. And yet, when a stranger asks her a simple question in English, her mind goes blank, her hands get a little cold, and the only sentence that comes out is, "Sorry, my English is not good." Now imagine giving that same person an AI tutor who never gets tired, a conversation partner who is available at 3 in the morning, a pronunciation coach that never judges her, and a personalized practice system that adapts to her exact level. She has more tools than any English learner in history. So here is the question that this episode is really about. If learning English has become easier than ever before, why are so many people still struggling to speak it? That question is not going to get a quick answer, because the real answer is more interesting than a simple tip or trick. It has to do with how our brains actually build a new skill, and it has to do with a mistake that almost every English learner is making right now without realizing it. A mistake that has nothing to do with intelligence or effort, and everything to do with how they are using the incredible tools sitting in their pocket. The world has quietly changed. Think about what English learning used to look like. A person would buy a thick textbook, sit in a classroom once or twice a week, maybe listen to an old CD in the car. And if they were lucky, they might find one native speaker willing to have a slow, patient conversation with them. Access to real practice was rare, expensive, and often uncomfortable. If you made a mistake, you had to wait for a teacher to notice it, and sometimes that teacher was busy with 20 other students who all needed the same attention. Learning English was, in many ways, a game of patience and luck, and progress often depended more on where you were born and how much money your family had than on how hard you were actually willing to work. Today, that entire structure has been quietly rebuilt. A learner can now get an explanation instantly, in the exact way that makes sense to them personally. They can simulate a job interview at midnight. They can ask for a paragraph to be corrected and get specific feedback in seconds instead of days. They can practice pronunciation as many times as they want without feeling embarrassed in front of a classroom full of other students. On paper, this sounds like the golden age of language learning, and in some ways, it really is. But here is the idea that this whole episode is built around. Access to better tools does not automatically create better learners. A person can own the most powerful learning technology in human history and still make almost no progress, simply because of how they choose to use it. Owning a gym membership has never been the same thing as getting stronger, and owning access to unlimited AI conversation has never been the same thing as actually becoming fluent. The biggest mistake: turning AI into a shortcut instead of an engine. There are two very different ways to use artificial intelligence when you are learning a language, and the difference between them decides almost everything about your results. The first way is using AI to avoid learning. The second way is using AI to accelerate learning. They can look almost identical from the outside. Both involve typing into the same chat window. Both feel productive in the moment, but the results they produce over the following months are completely different. Picture a learner named Elif. Elif is the kind of person who prepares endlessly before she ever tries anything, and that habit follows her into how she uses AI. When she wants to write an email in English, she asks AI to write it for her, and then she copies it word for word. When she does not understand a grammar point, she asks for an explanation, reads it once, nods to herself, and moves on without ever testing whether she actually absorbed it. When she wants new vocabulary, she asks for a list of 50 words, saves that list somewhere safe, and rarely opens it again except to feel a small sense of guilt. Every single action Elif is taking looks productive from the outside. She is, technically, using AI to learn English almost every day. But notice what is missing. At no point does Elif actually produce language on her own, struggle with it a little, and then get feedback on her own attempt. She is consuming information at an impressive speed, but she is not building a skill. And those two things are not the same, no matter how similar they feel in the moment. Now picture the same tools used differently. Instead of asking AI to write the email, a smarter approach is to write the email yourself first, even if it feels slow and a little clumsy, and then ask AI to identify what could be improved and explain why. Instead of asking for 50 new words, a smarter approach is to learn 5 words today, and then ask AI to create questions that force you to use those exact 5 words in your own original sentences. Instead of reading a grammar explanation once and moving on, a smarter approach is to try using that grammar point in 3 original sentences of your own, and only then check whether you got it right. This is the core principle worth remembering from this entire section. Don't let AI do the work that your brain needs to do. Let AI help you do more of the right kind of work, at a pace, and with a level of feedback that simply was not possible before this technology existed. AI as your personal English coach. Once you understand that distinction, everything about how you use AI for English starts to shift. Instead of treating it like a search engine that gives you answers, you start treating it like a personal coach who pushes you, tests you, and adjusts to your level in real time. The same way a good human coach would, except this one is available at any hour and never runs out of patience. For vocabulary, instead of asking for a long list of new words, a much smarter move is to tell your AI something like this: I learned these 5 words today. Ask me questions that force me to use them naturally, one at a time. And don't move to the next question until I've used the word correctly. This turns vocabulary from something you passively collect into something you actively practice, which is the only real way that new words become part of your natural automatic speech, instead of sitting quietly in a notebook you forget about. For speaking, instead of asking for a list of topics to talk about, you can say, Have a natural conversation with me about my weekend. Ask me one question at a time, wait for my full answer, and only correct the mistakes that really matter, not every small error. This small change in how you ask completely transforms the experience. You are no longer reading about English. You are producing it, Livy, under just enough pressure to make it feel real, but with a coach who is patient enough to let you finish your thought instead of interrupting you the moment you stumble. For writing, the same principle applies. Instead of saying, "Write my paragraph for me," a much more powerful request is, "I wrote this paragraph myself. Please identify my 3 most important mistakes and explain how I can avoid making them again next time." Notice the difference. In the first version, AI does the thinking, and you do the copying. In the second version, you do the thinking, and AI becomes the mirror that shows you exactly where your thinking went wrong. Only one of these actually builds a skill that stays with you long after the conversation ends. Listening practice can be built the same way. You can ask AI to create a short passage at your exact level, followed by comprehension questions and an explanation of any tricky vocabulary. And you can ask for it to get slightly harder each time you succeed, the way a good teacher slowly raises difficulty without you even noticing. And for real-world confidence, role play may be the most underused tool of all. You can ask AI to become an interviewer during a job interview, a stranger you're meeting for the first time, a waiter taking your order, a colleague disagreeing with your idea, or an immigration officer asking about your travel plans. The value doesn't come from AI generating content for you to passively read. It comes from the unpredictable, live back and forth, the same kind of exchange you'll face in real life, except now you can practice it as many times as you need before it actually matters. The New English Learning Loop. Underneath all of these examples is a simple, repeatable system, and once you understand it, you will start applying it automatically to almost anything you want to learn. Think of it as a loop with 5 steps that feed into each other. The first step is to learn something specific and small, like one useful expression, one grammar pattern, or one new idea, instead of trying to absorb everything at once and ending up remembering nothing at all. The second step is to use it immediately, by saying it out loud or writing your own original sentence with it, even before you feel fully ready or fully confident. The third step is to get feedback, whether from AI, a teacher, or any reliable source, so you can clearly see the gap between what you tried to say and what a fluent speaker would actually say in that same moment. The fourth step is to repeat the corrected version in a slightly different situation, so your brain encounters the same pattern more than once, from a slightly different angle each time. And the fifth step is to apply it later in a real conversation, a real message, or a real moment, which is the entire point of learning it in the first place, and the step that most learners skip without realizing it. Let's make this concrete with one everyday expression. Get the hang of something, which means to slowly become comfortable and skilled at doing something new after a period of practice. In the learning step, you understand what it means and see 1 or 2 natural examples of it being used. In the use step, instead of just nodding along and moving on, you immediately try to build your own sentence. Maybe something like, "It took me a while, but I finally got the hang of using the new coffee machine at work." In the feedback step, you ask AI whether your sentence sounds natural, And it might tell you that the sentence works perfectly, or it might gently point out a small issue with your word order that you never would have noticed on your own. In the repeat step, you use the same expression again the next day, but this time about something completely different, like learning to drive a new car or getting used to a new phone. And in the apply step, a few days later, you actually catch yourself saying, "I'm still getting the hang of it," in a real conversation with a colleague or a friend, without even thinking about the grammar in advance. That final moment, when the expression comes out naturally without translation and without hesitation, is the entire goal of language learning. And this five-step loop is what gets you there far faster than passively watching videos ever could on its own. Stop asking AI for answers. Start asking it for practice. This next idea might be the single most useful shift in this entire episode, so it's worth slowing down for it. Most people, when they use AI to learn English, ask for information. They type things like, "Teach me English," or "Explain the past tense," or "Give me some vocabulary." These prompts are not wrong exactly, but they are weak, because they put AI in the position of a lecturer, and put you in the position of a passive listener sitting in the back row. And passive listening, no matter how clear or well organized the explanation is, builds very little real ability to actually speak under pressure. Compare that weak prompt to something like this. "I am a B1 English learner. Have a 5-minute conversation with me about my daily routine. Ask me one question at a time. Don't correct every sentence immediately. Just let the conversation flow naturally. At the end, give me my 5 most important mistakes, and let me try the same conversation again." Notice everything that changed in this version. You told AI your level, so the difficulty stays appropriate instead of overwhelming. You asked for a real back and forth instead of a one-sided lecture. You asked it to hold back corrections during the conversation, which protects your confidence and lets you actually finish your thoughts without constant interruption. And you asked for feedback only at the end, followed by a second attempt, which is exactly how the learning loop from the previous section works in real practice. Once you start thinking this way, you can apply the same principle constantly in almost any learning situation. You can ask AI to challenge you instead of simply explaining things to you. You can ask it to question you, quiz you, correct you at the right moment instead of every moment, role play with you, force you to explain an idea in your own words, make you recall something you learned yesterday without looking it up, adapt the difficulty based on how you're actually doing, and revisit the specific mistakes you tend to repeat over and over. If there is one sentence from this entire episode that is worth remembering above all others, it might be this one. The best AI prompt is often not "give me information." It is "make me use what I know." The 20-minute AI English routine. All of these ideas are powerful, but they only matter if you can actually fit them into a real, busy life full of work, family, and everything else competing for your time. So let's build something realistic here. This is not a demanding hour-long study plan that only works for someone with unlimited free time. It is a focused 20-minute daily routine, and it is built specifically for someone who genuinely does not have much extra time to spare. The first 5 minutes are for input. You listen to or read something short and manageable, whether that's a short article, a 2-minute podcast clip, or a passage that AI generates specifically at your level on a topic you actually care about. The goal here is not to understand every single word perfectly, but to expose your brain to natural English in a short, low-pressure burst before the real work begins. The next 5 minutes, minutes 6 through 10, are for interaction. You discuss what you just read or listened to with AI, answering questions about it and sharing your own opinion, which forces you to actively process the language instead of just letting it pass through you. Minutes 11 through 15 are for speaking, where you explain the topic out loud, without reading from a script, as if you were telling a friend about it over coffee. This is often the most uncomfortable 5 minutes of the whole routine, and that discomfort is actually a good sign, because it means real learning is happening in that moment. Minutes 16 through 18 are for feedback, where you quickly review the most important mistakes from your speaking attempt, deliberately ignoring small, unimportant errors and focusing only on the patterns that actually matter for how you'll be understood. And the final 2 minutes, 19 and 20, are for repetition, where you use those corrected expressions one more time out loud. So the correct version is the last thing your brain hears before you move on with the rest of your day. 20 focused minutes like this, done consistently day after day, will move a learner further than an unfocused hour of passively watching videos with English subtitles running in the background while checking a phone at the same time. The reason is simple. This routine forces active production and immediate feedback, which is exactly the combination that builds real speaking ability, while passive watching mostly builds passive recognition. The kind of understanding where you can follow along comfortably but still freeze completely when it's finally your turn to speak. Why AI cannot replace the learner. Now think about Thomas for a moment. Thomas is the opposite type of learner from Elif. He is enthusiastic, he starts new habits constantly, and he genuinely loves the idea of using AI for everything related to his English. But Thomas has a different problem. He starts strong, has an exciting first conversation with an AI tutor, feels amazed by how helpful and patient it is, and then quietly stops showing up after a few days, moving on to the next exciting tool or the next shiny new app he discovered online. His enthusiasm is completely real, but it never turns into consistency. And consistency turns out to be the one ingredient that no amount of impressive technology can replace for him. This brings us to an important truth that deserves to be said clearly and honestly, without any exaggeration in either direction. AI can help with access, personalization, practice opportunities, feedback, repetition, conversation simulation, explanations, and organization. All of that is genuinely valuable, and none of it existed at this scale even a few years ago. But there are things that only the learner can do, and no amount of clever technology changes that fact. Only you can think through a sentence before you say it out loud. Only you can remember an expression well enough to use it again a week later without checking your notes. Only you can actually speak the words out loud instead of quietly reading them in your head. Only you can tolerate the uncomfortable feeling of making a mistake in front of another real person. Only you can develop the confidence that comes from surviving an awkward conversation and realizing afterward that it wasn't nearly as bad as you had feared it would be. AI can create the opportunity for practice endlessly and patiently, but it cannot walk through that door for you. AI can create opportunities for practice. Only you can actually practice. This is not meant to sound discouraging, and it's definitely not an anti-AI message wrapped up as advice. The real message is more precise than that. AI is powerful when it increases your effort in the right direction, not when it quietly and comfortably replaces your effort altogether without you even noticing it happening. The danger of the easy button. Here is a psychological trap that almost every modern learner falls into at some point, often without ever noticing it. AI makes it incredibly easy to translate a sentence instantly, summarize a long article in seconds, correct a piece of writing, rewrite an awkward sentence into a polished one, and explain any concept immediately and clearly. All of this convenience feels like progress, and in the short term, it genuinely feels good. But language learning depends on something that convenience quietly removes from the process: retrieval and production. Your brain builds real fluency through the effort of searching for a word, constructing a sentence, and sometimes failing to find the right phrase and having to work around it creatively. When AI instantly hands you the polished answer before you've even tried on your own, that essential mental effort disappears, and without it, very little actually sticks in long-term memory, no matter how correct or elegant the final answer was. This is why one of the most useful habits you can build is learning to sit with a small amount of discomfort before immediately reaching for help. A simple rule to remember is this: try first, ask second, repeat third. Before you ask AI to translate a word, try to describe it in English using words you already know, even clumsily. Before you ask AI to fix your sentence, say it out loud twice, and see if you can hear the problem yourself first. There is a real, measurable difference between the experience of AI gave me the answer and the experience of AI helped me discover the answer. And only the second one tends to leave a lasting mark on your memory weeks later. How to use AI without becoming dependent on it. Based on everything covered so far, here are some practical habits that help you avoid falling into the trap of the easy button and instead build a healthy relationship with AI as a genuine learning tool rather than a crutch. Try to answer a question yourself before asking AI to answer it for you, because the struggle itself is quietly part of the learning process, even when it feels unproductive in the moment. Try to speak your answer out loud before you read the corrected version, so you fully experience your own attempt first. Never collect new vocabulary without immediately using it in a sentence of your own, because words that are only saved and never used tend to disappear from memory just as quickly as they arrived. Ask AI to test you sometimes instead of always asking it to simply explain things, because being tested activates a noticeably different and deeper kind of memory than passively being told information. Pay close attention to your repeated mistakes specifically, because those particular patterns are exactly where your real improvement is quietly waiting. Use AI to create practice opportunities for yourself, not just more content to read or watch. Whenever possible, combine your AI practice with real human communication, because real conversations carry an unpredictability and emotional weight that no simulation can fully replicate. And finally, every so often, deliberately practice without any AI at all, because this is the most honest way to measure exactly how much of what you've learned has truly become yours. Build your own personal AI English system. Once these habits start to feel natural rather than forced, it helps to organize them into something more structured, almost like a personal learning system rather than a random collection of tips picked up from different videos. You don't need dozens of different apps to make this work. You can simply think of AI as switching between different roles depending on what you need that day. A speaking coach who pushes you to talk. A vocabulary coach who tests new words in context. A grammar coach who checks your usage. A writing coach who reviews your paragraphs. A listening coach who builds short passages at your level. An interview partner who simulates professional pressure. A debate partner who challenges your opinions, and a daily conversation partner who simply talks with you about ordinary life. The goal is not to use every role each day, which would quickly become exhausting. The goal is to build a simple, repeatable routine around the 2 or 3 roles that matter most right now. One good system used consistently is more powerful than 10 tools used randomly. And that single idea will save most learners from the familiar cycle of constantly switching apps and never building real momentum. What will actually make you faster? After everything we've covered, it's worth stepping back and asking directly, what is the actual advantage that AI gives an English learner today? It's tempting to think the advantage is the technology itself, but that's not quite accurate. The real advantage is what the technology quietly makes possible. It gives you more practice, because meaningful practice is now easier to access than ever, at any hour, from anywhere. It gives you faster feedback, because mistakes that used to take days to get corrected by a busy teacher can now be identified within seconds. It gives you more personalization, because activities can match your exact level and interests instead of a generic textbook written for thousands of anonymous students. It gives you more consistency, because practice is available whether that's early morning or late at night. And it gives you more active learning, because you can genuinely interact with the language instead of only consuming it passively. The deeper truth is that the AI age does not eliminate the fundamentals of language learning. It simply makes it far easier to practice those fundamentals correctly and consistently, which is exactly the piece that has been missing for most learners for a very long time. The memorable framework. If you remember nothing else from this episode, remember this simple equation. AI plus active practice equals smarter English learning. AI gives you access. You provide the effort. Practice creates ability. Feedback improves accuracy. Repetition creates automaticity, meaning the language eventually comes out without you having to think about it first, the way it does for a native speaker. And real communication is what finally creates genuine confidence, the kind that stays with you long after any single conversation ends. Each piece depends on the one before it, and none of these pieces can quietly replace another. Access without effort produces nothing lasting. Effort without feedback simply repeats the same mistakes forever, sometimes for years. Repetition without real communication stays trapped safely inside practice exercises and never quite becomes truly yours. A realistic transformation. Let's return to a fictional learner, someone we can call Daniel, and picture 2 very different versions of his English learning journey side by side. In the old version, Daniel watches English videos most evenings after work, saves long vocabulary lists into a notes app he rarely opens again, studies grammar rules carefully and diligently, rarely speaks out loud because there's simply no one around to speak with, and quietly feels frustrated that after years of genuine effort, his spoken English still doesn't match what's sitting patiently in his head. Now picture the new version of Daniel's routine, built entirely on the ideas from this episode. He picks one small, specific topic each day, instead of trying to cover everything at once. He discusses that topic with AI for a few minutes, actively responding instead of passively reading along. He speaks his ideas out loud rather than only typing them silently into a chat box. He receives targeted feedback on the 2 or 3 mistakes that actually matter most, not an overwhelming list of every tiny error he made. He repeats the corrected phrases in a brand new sentence of his own creation, and eventually, without any single dramatic or magical moment, he finds himself using those same phrases naturally in a real conversation with a real person, without pausing to translate first. Nothing about this transformation happened overnight, and nothing about it required unrealistic effort or hours of extra time. What changed was not Daniel's intelligence or his motivation, both of which were already strong in the old version too. What changed, quietly and completely, was his process. English learning moments from this episode. Along the way, this episode has naturally used several expressions that are genuinely useful in everyday spoken English, and it's worth quickly gathering a few of them here before we finish. To get the hang of something means to slowly become comfortable and skilled at it after some practice. To figure something out means to solve or understand something through your own thinking rather than being told the answer directly by someone else. To struggle with something describes having real, honest difficulty with it, and it's a completely normal, healthy part of learning rather than a sign of failure or weakness. To hold yourself back means to unintentionally prevent your own progress, often through fear, overthinking, or excessive preparation. To put something into practice means to actually use an idea in real life instead of only understanding it comfortably in theory. To fall into the trap of something describes making a mistake that seems reasonable or even smart in the moment, but quietly damages your progress over time. To stick with something means to continue doing it consistently, even after it stops feeling new or exciting. To get better at something simply describes steady, ongoing improvement over time, rather than a single sudden leap forward. And to make progress simply means that you are moving forward, even if that movement feels slow or nearly invisible from one single day to the next. These aren't just vocabulary items to memorize in isolation. If you noticed how naturally they fit into the ideas discussed throughout this episode, that's exactly the kind of natural, meaningful context that helps expressions like these actually stay in your memory for good. What to actually do now? It would be easy to end an episode like this with the usual advice to like, subscribe, and see you next time, but that kind of ending doesn't really match what this episode has been about from the very beginning. So instead, here is a small, specific challenge, something you can call the 7-Day AI English Challenge. For the next 7 days, spend just 20 minutes with English, using the routine described earlier in this episode. Choose one real, specific topic each day, rather than something vague or overly broad. Speak about that topic out loud, even if no one else in the room is listening to you. Use AI as your conversation partner, not as an answer machine that does the thinking for you. Ask for feedback that's targeted and specific, not an overwhelming wall of corrections. Repeat your corrected sentences until they genuinely start to feel natural in your own mouth. If you're comfortable doing it, record yourself so you can actually hear your own progress. Build across the week. And try to use at least 3 new expressions during each session. The same way this episode wove learning moments naturally into a real conversation, instead of listing them separately in a dry vocabulary section. Don't spend the next week only learning about how to learn English better. Spend the next week actually using English, out loud, imperfectly, and consistently, day after day. That single shift from passive information to active practice is really the entire message of this episode, and it applies far beyond just language learning too. The goal was never to make English complicated, and it still isn't now. The goal is simply to find a smarter way to make English a real, active part of your daily life. One small conversation at a time. One 20-minute session at a time. If you try this challenge, come back and share how it went. And specifically, tell us this. How would you use AI to improve your own English? And if this episode helped you see your learning process a little differently today, there's more waiting for you in the next one, where we'll keep exploring smarter, more human ways to actually learn this language, instead of just quietly studying it from a distance.